The 2022 Virtual Business Conference, February 24th. General Manager Panel moderated by Dave Dvorak, with Brett Schwartz, Mike Woody, and Brian Armstrong.
Welcome, everyone. And I'd like to actually just welcome you to the USPTA Virtual Southern Business Conference. My name is Dave Dvorak, and I'm going to be the host of our first seminar today. It's entitled How to GM See Our Tennis Industry in the next 5 years and the next 10 years, and how that correlates to today's tennis professional. I'm very pleased to be joined by three very distinguished gentlemen today, two of whom I've had the privilege of knowing for quite some time, and the third who I've had the honor of learning from in the last couple of years. And so these very experienced veterans of our business will be sharing their insights and their wisdoms with all of you. No pressure, gentlemen, here. I'm sure you've all had the opportunity to read their bios, and so I won't go through all of their former positions and honors, but I want you I want them to tell you a little bit about themselves as we go along and about their careers. So first, let me introduce the first member of our panel. It's Brett Schwartz. Brett is currently the general manager at the New Orleans Lawn Tennis Club. And Brett is a USPTA master professional, and he's been teaching tennis for 35 years. And I know he's coached at Tulane, and he was the head coach at University of Louisiana at Lafayette, both for the men's and women's teams. And so he's also currently the USTA executive vice president. So Brett wears many hats. Brett, thank you for being here with us today. Yep. Mike Woody is also on our panel. Mike and I go way back to our days in Michigan, and Mike is now the national tennis director for Genesis Health Clubs. And Mike has a history of running big programs. He did so in Michigan as well. And now he oversees the tennis operations for 7 clubs. And Mike is also vice president of the PTR. And our third member here today is Brian Armstrong. Brian is got a lot of hats that he wears. He's an executive search recruiter and a career coach. He's a consultant in the private club and hospitality industry, and along with specializing in coaching looking for executive chefs and assistant GMs and directors of racket searches. So I've gotten to know Brian a little bit through his coaching and advising with McMahon Tennis Careers. So Brian's been in the business for 17 years, and he's also been the former general manager of the Country Club of Fairfax. And also he's president of the national chapter, the capital chapter of the Club Management Association of America. So gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being here today. My first question to all of you, and I'm going to start with Brian, if you would just take a couple minutes and share with everybody how you got to be where you are now, and how you got into the industry, and then what led you to where you are.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure to be with everybody this afternoon or this morning, depending on how far west you are. I started in the golf world and restaurants and food and beverage, and kept raising my hand. My wife used to say this when I go to different meetings. She'd say, sit on your hand. When someone says they need help, can anybody help? And you raise your hand, and the next thing you know, you're running a club. So I kind of came up through food and beverage, through golf. So I had the sports background and the food and beverage, got into private clubs, member-owned clubs, worked both corporate-owned and member-owned. I've spent a lot more time in member-owned. So the dynamic, as Brett, I'm sure, is aware, is, boards and committees and the political dynamic. Mainly I worked in city clubs, so no sports at all. And then I worked in full amenity country clubs with rackets and golf, pools, fitness, all that. So a pretty wide variety of experience. Got out of that, got into more consulting, recruiting. It's been about 5 or 6 years, and honestly doing more coaching now than recruiting and consulting, just because of the industry. There's such a challenge out there. So happy to be part of this, and looking forward to a great session. You're on mute, Dave. Still on mute.
Okay, now, Brett, tell us about your journey. Sorry, I muted, but I shouldn't have done that. Brett, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey?
Sure. My journey is definitely a little bit different from Brian's in that, I started off in tennis, and I've worked in, resorts and private clubs, member-owned, privately owned club, member-owned clubs, and, run the whole gamut, even done some college coaching. But how I got into club manager was, the GM of our club resigned, and the guys on the board who knew me from teaching knew that I had, advanced degree and master in business administration and a marketing degree. And they just thought I could handle the job. And they asked me if I was interested. So basically I thought about it for a couple of days, and I said, okay, I can do this. So basically that's my journey. It's not an exciting one as far as like Brian's was, where he was in it all the way, going through, but I just happened into it, and it's been enjoyable. We've been done a lot of different things at our facility, and it's been nice. So my journey isn't a simple one. It could be a journey for anyone on this call. Frankly, if you're a tennis pro, you could move into management if that's where you aspire to be.
And thank you, Brett. And then you lead right into Mike, and because as a tennis pro, he did move into management as well. So, Mike, will you share your journey?
No. Yes, I will. Yeah. So played college tennis, was actually going to get into nursing school. And this is where lesson number one comes into play, is I didn't know what I didn't know about the industry. So I found a mentor, Tom Gray, longstanding USPTA member, kind of mentored me before we even had a mentoring program. So I got involved in the industry, did workshops, and discovered there's a huge opportunity in tennis. And this is, again, 38 years ago. So I'm 58 right now, which I'll share right at the end here. But so I saw that there was opportunity, and what I was looking for was tennis as a business. And so I looked at, who are the leaders, learn from them. And we're just like Dave said, we knew each other back in Grand Rapids. So I worked at a club there for 5 years. Then I went to Midland, Michigan, where I spent most of my time, 23 years with a big club, 16 indoor courts, 16 outdoor courts, 32 courts in a town of 40,000. I was a big fish in a small pond. At 52, I decided that I wanted to take a new venture, and got an opportunity to work for Genesis Health Clubs. And at the time, there was 6 to 7 clubs. So Dave shared my old bio. Today, we're at 15 facilities. We've got 100 pros. We got 136 tennis courts that I'm leading. Now I'm a small fish in a bigger pond. And that's how I've decided to really take my career in the next 10 years. So my lesson number 2 is what I found during all that journey was I needed to create my own vision. And if I believe something could happen, I could make it happen in our industry. And so the lesson is you create your own destiny. And so with that, my final lesson is I'm going out big. And so my last 10 years in this industry, I figure around 68 to 70, I don't know if I'll cash out, but I'll be in a different position. So I'm going hard.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. So I want you guys to put your way back hats on and think about what was your impression when you got into the business, what a tennis pro position was like, a tennis pro job. And I want to hear from Brian first, if you don't mind.
All right, Dave. So yeah, interesting journey insofar as coming up through golf. It was just, I understood the concept, right? It was pretty similar. Teach, keep the members happy, make a little money sitting on the driving range teaching or on the court teaching. So it was definitely take it to a sports vernacular. It was a position player, right? It was, yep, that's what you're there for, solving a need. And so that was my impression way back when. It has changed since, but.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Brett, what was your impression?
Well, I came up through the public parks to a degree and some community clubs. So, I think basically the the tennis professionals were just giving tennis lessons and clinics and, running tournaments. There wasn't a whole lot of programming. They didn't even have junior programs when I was growing up. So it was a totally different dynamic. You kind of did it on your own. And, you took a few lessons, you went and played with your friends, and then the pros were there to help you out. And that's really what I saw as a kid growing up in my teens. And obviously it's changed, as Brian said.
Well, and yeah, like I said, we're going to get Mike. So Mike, you said you got into tennis, but you weren't planning on getting into it. You had a different direction. So what was your impression of a tennis pro?
I looked at it as tennis pros were pretty short-term focused. And so, again, so was I at a younger age. You just worried about building a paycheck and things. And so I think my first impression was, were pros presenting themselves that they could make a career in this business and how they were doing it? So my impression was very short. Tennis pros tended to be very short-term focused, weren't asking the next questions. And so I saw the industry as a huge opportunity to, one, shine, to make a living, make a career, and make an impact.
So let me follow that up with you then. What do you see differently now? What is your view of a tennis professional now?
I think it's the same opportunity. And I think it's, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. I think there's even right now, there's even more opportunity, but you have to do it a little differently. And so I think it's the same thing. I continually work with my team on getting out of the short-term focus and really coaching them up to look at this as a career, defend the career, defend the profession, because I think it's vital to the community at large.
Brett, how about you? How have you seen it change for the tennis profession?
Well, I agree with Mike that there is tremendous potential because we have such a shortage of tennis pros, number one. But also I view it in a public-private lens. In the public lens, I don't know that there is some programming, but more so from a private perspective, I think that it's more programming, customer service. So I think it's more member centric, whereas at the public facilities, there's customer service involved with that, but it's not all encompassing. It's more, from what I see, lessons, maybe some clinics and things like that. And then, they're not beholden to the facility a lot of times to do things. You have a lot of pros that are just, just teaching lessons, and they're not interested in doing some other things outside of that, lessons and clinics, and then they go home, unfortunately. And I think that's one area that definitely needs to change if we're going to grow our industry. We have to get the public facility pros more engaged in programming and bigger things than just lessons and clinics.
So Brian, do you have a different view of today's professionals than when you first got into the business?
Definitely in my own head, but that kind of was where I started, probably not accurately. It seems to be a lot more dynamic of a position, right? I think Brett said it earlier, there was no programming. Well, now you got to be marketing. You got to be communications. You got to be the social media manager. You've got to be executive. I mean, how many people in tennis 10, 15 years ago had to know their way around a budget or know their way around a capital project, and now you do. So maybe that, as I was just sitting here thinking about it, maybe that offers more opportunity, right? You're to someone who wants more and wants to learn more, can go out and take on more responsibility. So I definitely see it as a much bigger position than when I, in my head, I don't know if the position's always been there or if it was just my head, but far more of a leader in the industry, far more of executive level leadership positions than what I originally thought when I started as just a teaching pro, right? And so there still is that opportunity, but I think even with that is a more dynamic position.
So
hey, Dave,
yeah,
let me, as we're talking here, I think it's interesting because the funnel right now of getting in the industry, it's wide open. So you can a tennis professional can enter our profession pretty easy because we're all hiring, and we're even being less selective today because there's fewer candidates. So now pros get I'm going to say this and it's going to sound edgy, but you get a false positive that you're getting into this profession and you don't need all these skill sets like Brian mentioned. So pros coming in today have to be armed with a lot more tools to be successful. They can get the job, but to be really successful, it's pushing, it's pulling, it's doing all these extra things. So I think that's the big, for me, that's one of the big changes.
Okay, so that's great that you say that, and I want to ask about those tools in a minute. So, but I want to back up just a little bit. How do you, as general managers now, how do you, when you talk with your colleagues, how do your colleagues view this profession? Because some of you are like Brian, you don't have as much background in the tennis world. You and Brett, Mike, have a lot of background in tennis, but you are talking with general managers and other clubs all the time. How is this profession viewed? And you said you might have to be edgy, but I think you might have to be edgy in this response. And I'm going to start with Brett.
Well, I think that in a lot of respects, the tennis professionals are not viewed as professional enough in some instances. And the biggest thing I talk about when I speak with other general managers is how to bring value to the membership through tennis, and how your tennis professional can actually do that, or your director of tennis or whatever your programming is can bring that value to your club. I deal mostly in the not-for-profit club world where I am. A lot of times the bottom line is not the most important thing. It's the service of the membership. Mike's probably got a different paradigm that he's working off of. If he's working in a for-profit club, a little skinnier margins there. I think that value for the membership, because people are paying dues, is really what is discussed, and how to bring that about at the different facilities. That's basically the general manager discussions that I have with other general managers, and I get my brain picked a lot since I was a tennis pro for a long time.
Mike, your thoughts?
I think, I go with this, is that tennis pros, or the tennis business as a whole, so Genesis is a health club. So when we look at why do profit clubs and companies go into tennis? Well, a tennis member is going to stay with you 4 to 5 times longer. They'll spend 4 to 5 times more money. So in our mind, at least what we're trying to do as a company, and the other for-profit leaders that I talk to, we're going gangbusters, because I think the current environment is weeding out the poor performers. So only the stronger are surviving. So for us, we're trying to grow the market. We're trying to grow what's going on. We see a huge opportunity, and probably actually we're going to talk about one of those points, but we're focused on tennis. The tennis pro, we're looking at, we're not really fighting with the industry. We're just taking where the environment is, and we're going, let's take advantage of it. And the cool thing is the numbers are growing. Pros are making more money, and but we just need more of them.
Okay, so Brian, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on this. Again, we're talking about your colleagues, not you. We've already heard from you, but your colleagues.
I think one of the biggest challenges, again, tend to be in the nonprofit, full amenity club is the land I live in. I think tennis gets overlooked, rackets gets overlooked. I think the better job you do, the more under the radar you fly, which does you a disservice. The impression is, oh yeah, they got it. They got a bunch of people on the courts. They're happy. A lot of general managers, hopefully it's not on here, a lot of general managers truly do not understand the expertise you have, the work you put in, how much you do to keep it looking seamless, and it gets overlooked. And I think that does the profession a little bit of a disservice because you're working really hard and then people just look right past you and go, oh, it's just tennis. Oh, it's just tennis, right? I think specifically with a multi-amenity club, we'll talk about this later, but what does the superintendent, what does the golf course superintendent have to do to get money to put into new sand and sand traps, right? Just walk in and smile and they get a couple $100,000. What do you got to do to get new lights, net, right? So it's challenging in that nonprofit multi-amenity. The better you do, the more under the radar you fly, the harder it is to do your job. So
okay, so you make a great point, and I'm going to agree with you on everything about that. So how long, and this one's directed just to you, how long were you in the business before you came to that insight, to that conclusion?
I've had the luxury of working, the good fortune, I guess, of working in clubs with two really strong directors of rackets. And until I sat down and said, okay, I came at it with a lack of knowledge. I came in through golf, so I get that. Food, I got that. But this tennis thing, I played a lot as a kid, but now I'm managing it. It's a multi-million-dollar club. Well, I got to figure this out. So I reach out, I sit down, I spend time, and I dig a little deeper, dig a little deeper, dig a little deeper, and wow, look at what is involved here. It's far more than I expected. So I'm not saying I'm better or worse than anybody else, but if you have a GM that doesn't do that and just keeps cruising along, okay, then that's going to be a difficult situation because they don't know. And so it's changed a lot since I got into it. Just, again, me wanting to open my mind and learn more and go, wow, this is a lot going on. What's going on down there? But until I took that step, it didn't happen. I could have just as easily not done it, and I don't know where I would be, but it doesn't matter. But I could have not done it, and it wouldn't have been as good. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, well, it does. All right, so let me get into the nuts and bolts of what we started talking about here, and I'm going to start with Mike because he said one of the words that I think is important, and you were talking about tools that a tennis professional needs. So, Mike, you start telling us what tools a tennis professional needs to succeed or to grow into another area of the career, or in their career path.
Well, I think the tools they have to, all the marketing tools that are available, whether it's apps, I think every pro should have it amazes me that many pros still don't have their own laptops and their own, because you need to be a self promoter. You need to be a self marketer. You got to be, there's so many things out there. You can make slick flyers with a thing called canva.com. It's free. MailChimp to send out emails. So there's so many tools. And I think the newer pros, I think the younger pros know those tools. They're available. They just got to remember they're using it. And I think that the other tools, anything that's growing tennis is what they need to have. So of course, still many of them aren't on Facebook. They don't have a LinkedIn account. They're not using any of the other social media things. Their website isn't dynamic enough. So to me, those are the things that you've got to be able to use. And you don't just, but you still got a phone call, you still got a text, you still got an email. You got to do all of those things. There's not a one laser way of communicating. It's still buckshot. It's just different buckshot.
Brett, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just some obvious thoughts, actually. Education, I think, is one of the tools that we have to provide for our pros, because they have to stay current with what's going on in the industry and the market, what's changing with respect to technique, things like that. What's changing with respect to programming, ideas that they can come up with to make fun events for the members. So I think providing education for them. A lot of GMs, I think, don't want to have an education budget in a lot of respects. And I want to circle back just for 1 second to what Brian was saying before with respect to the GMs. I think we need to do a better job of educating GMs as to the tennis pros' value in a more nationwide way. I think they need to understand that the tennis pro is bringing value to the membership. And a lot of times they look at the tennis pro and they view them as a liability, because on the balance sheet it looks like a loss, and they can't quantify what amount of dues is corresponds to the activity in the tennis. So they view it in the wrong way. And I think we need to educate the GMs. We need to do a better job with that also, so that they do understand this value proposition better.
100%.
Brian, are you thinking, do you have any other thoughts on the tools that pros need or may want to have in order for them to succeed?
I think as you progress through any industry, when we're talking about rackets and tennis, right, leadership skills, don't teach that, right? They teach you how to run an event. They teach you how to run a social event, count inventory. Those are good skills. You need that. But there's a whole different set of skills, I think, as you rise to the top of the organization, whether it's in a nonprofit, dare I say political, some political skills and how to maneuver that, leadership, how to lead your team. I think department heads in general, and Department of Rackets, Director of Tennis, Director of Rackets, you lead your team, so they report to you. You're part of a team, other department heads. You report to a general manager. You also interact with committees and boards. So, as I talk to different directors, you may go from a meeting with your team in the morning to lunch with your committee chair to a budget meeting with your GM into a board meeting that night to present the budget. So you're in all four groups in one day, and each one takes a different skill. And so I think I don't think we, and not Rackets at all, by no means, all management, they don't teach that leadership. They teach you how to take a good inventory. They teach you how to run an event, but you don't really get into that leadership. So I see that as being one. I think, another one is the strategic skills. Again, you're asked to think more strategically and act more strategically and have those strategic conversations. And again, I think you're in a tough position because you're caught in daily operations and you have to worry about who's on the court at what time. But at the same time, to be successful, you need to think a little and act a little more strategic.
So you're leading into my next question, because we were talking, about tools, and then I wanted to really talk about skills. And so you've hit on a couple of them there. No, that's great. That's great. I love it. And so I want to hear from Mike and Brett on skills as well, because both of you guys talked about off-court tools, and we need to be spending time. You talk about leadership. That's inside, maybe on the court, maybe outside the court. But what about just off-court skills that lead you to another position? And I'm thinking in terms of the business side. The thing that so many tennis pros get into the tennis world and know how to get on the court and know how to make money on the court. But if they want to advance their career more, what should they be working on the business side? What skills do they need to develop there? Mike, you've done a great job of, in your career, going from a tennis professional and using your business acumen and also just your desire as a business person in the tennis business. What do pros need as far as what kind of skills do they need to develop?
Yeah, I was thinking as Brian was talking is what's interesting is we have so much access to information today. There's so many how-to guides for everything, right? You can get on YouTube, you can, pull up anything off the internet and become self-educated. And so I think that's one of the first steps is you have to, here are the tools. Right? It's financials, how to set a budget, how to have a daily scorecard, or how do you set metrics to measure yourself? So I think that's really important. How do you set the bar to know where you're meeting expectations, where you're exceeding expectations, and where you're not meeting, and then strategizing around that. Communication, how to run a meeting effectively. If you really look at all parts of any business, the question is, how do I make myself better at it? And so it's just constantly having a mentor. That's a tool. Ongoing education, whether it's online with other, seeking that out. I think all of us should be investing probably $1,500 to $2,000 a year on continually bettering ourselves, however that is, whether it's in the framework of time or you're paying somebody for it. So I think those are probably, for me, those are the huge things: marketing, promotions, and having the whole slew of administrative skills. I still hear pros go, I hate administrative skills. That's why I got into being a tennis pro. But sorry, it doesn't have to be your strength. It just has to be something you have to be able to do.
You've gone from the tennis court to the leadership role at your club. What skills did you have or did you develop on the way?
Well, I think just general business skills are needed to be a tennis pro. One of the things that I want to drill down a little bit more on what Brian said is, and Mike mentioned it, is communication. The tennis pro's job is about communicating with his lessons, what he wants to get across in his lessons as far as technique or strategy or whatever. It's also communication for programming. It's communication with members. Communication up the chain with the GM, communication with the staff, and you have to put a premium on that, because the tennis director position is, in a lot of senses, it's a business position, but it's a very social position, and in a lot of respects, like clubs that don't have golf and they do have tennis, the tennis program is the face of the club in a lot of respects. So, if you have a great tennis program and you're communicating well with all the members and you have a great program, the club can be, I've seen clubs fail or succeed based on how the tennis does. Now that model is, and those are kind of some community type clubs or clubs like that, but I think that model is going away because clubs now have to have more amenities. That's where the pickleball is coming in, and fitness and the other things. But to me, it's communication, and the pros, directors of tennis should have general business knowledge. How running pro shops, pricing for programming, making sure they understand what the market is around them so that they don't overprice and outrun the market. They have to know how to market themselves. So I just think it's a lot of general business skills. And, if they have a college degree, that's great. But again, education through the USPTA education, there's all these different ways that you can educate yourself in whatever you're interested in. And, whatever you found a weakness, or when you get a review from your GM, if they show a weakness in your review, then, that's a way to go about improving yourself. And in the end, it makes you a better pro.
I'm going to add to this, and I know I'm not the panelist here, but I'd like to just throw this out. I also think one of the areas that and I've seen it for many, many, many years, is that tennis professionals don't know necessarily the technical side. And I'm talking about the equipment. And I think that's such a big part of keeping people in the game. And, if we're putting the wrong kind of equipment and the wrong kind of strings in a racket, or the wrong kind of racket in their hands, we're not doing them any good. We're doing them a disservice. And I've seen that for many, many, many years, where pros don't understand that side of it as well as they should. And then you see the ones that do really make an impact on their clients, on their students, and grow their own business just from being sought out as someone who's an expert in an area. So take that for what it's worth. All right, guys, we don't have as much time. I got a lot of questions for you. This was brought up, so we got to talk about it here, and that's pickleball. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you. How is pickleball affecting your business? How are you using it?
Yeah, so we've made a stance at Genesis that we're going to have it as here's my best way to say it. We're not in it. We're not in it to the high degree, and the reason is we're putting our eggs on the tennis part, because if others are going to get distracted and do pickleball, we're going to continue to dominate with tennis. So I have a different view and edge on it. I'm not saying it's a bad sport or anything. I'm just saying is my focus, our laser focus right now, and what we're making a big investment is in tennis. And so that's my stance with it. So I do have some clubs that are using it. It's a very small portion of some revenue generation, but that's it.
Brett, how important is pickleball to your club?
We do not have pickleball at my club. We're all clay. It's kind of hard to play on clay. We've had a couple inquiries about it, but not very much. But I think the pickleball question for everybody listening is it's a question of real estate for me, just from a USTA perspective. You know, you have tennis courts, that's your tennis infrastructure, and pickleball is coming in and removing some of your infrastructure for you to actually grow the game of tennis. And we have all these, you know, 4 million new players in the game since COVID, and our infrastructure is getting eroded away by some of the pickleball, enthusiasts. And, I think we need to, as an industry, we need to defend the real estate that we do have, and make sure that the program is right on the tennis courts so that pickleball can't come and take over our courts.
Brian, when you're in your new role as a recruiter and working with clubs, how important is pickleball?
It's funny. It's either hot or cold, right? It's either they're all in or they're not in. And I think that can be good. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I completely agree with what Brett's saying. It's usually a real estate challenge, right? If you have the space, you can make it work. I think a lot of multi-amenity clubs have seen what everybody's seeing through COVID is increased participation. I think one of the challenges with a member-owned club is the squeaky wheel. Right? You get 2 or 3 people that can make a racket. Get that. Anyway, make a lot of noise. And you're building a pickleball program. Again, I think if they can embrace it and it works for them, go for it. All right. I think there's a lot to be said for let's have a new amenity. Let's bring in some new people. I think the challenge is when you run out of real estate and you start taking away. Now I think you get into a little bit more of a political challenge that you should be very careful of how that can work. So I think to each their own. If it works for you, go for it. If it doesn't, don't give up the real estate.
Thank you. Okay, so I know we're going to be running out of time soon, and I have 2 more questions that I want to hear from everybody, and I want you to have time to answer these. And all 3 of you guys have been currently involved or have been heavily involved in the past in professional organizations. Brian, how important is that for a professional to be involved? And I want to hear from Mike and from Brett.
Hugely. I mean, I think that's the industry leaders, right? So you have to embrace that. You have to dive in. It goes back to something Brett said earlier, which I thought was great. If you can't fight and get the money from your club, you need to find a way to spend it on your own. If it's through professional organizations, great. If you're afraid of getting up in front of somebody, go to Toastmasters, right? You have to actively work on bettering yourself all the time. Hopefully you're at a club that can see the value in that. And I think the professional organizations are huge. Seems to be mostly their number one goals is to better the individual profession. So do everything you can with that. They have tremendous resources. I know a lot of rackets people who remember CMAA, right? I mean, you can cross-utilize some of these organizations. Again, it gets a little expensive if your club's not paying for it. It can get a little pricey, but avail yourself to all of that. There's a lot of good information out there. There's a lot of good organizations, and that is huge. As you move to senior level, people want to see that. They want to see your part. It becomes a question as to why not? Why aren't they? Why aren't they? Is this for real? You can see people that have 20 years experience. Why aren't they a member of this organization? Is this just a hobby? It's not a hobby. They've been doing it for 20 years, but there's a question. So come down on the right side of that, which is be part of it.
So Mike, are you encouraging your pros? Are you encouraging not just to be members of associations, but to actually be active in the organization?
Yes. And I think they should be involved in USTA, USPTA, PTR, used to be TIA, high school associations, because I think it's your best way to refine your total business. So yes, I want them to be active. I don't force them to be active. I believe if you're going to have a career in this industry, it's the right thing to do, because the people who do that tend to do pretty well in the industry.
Brett, why are you so involved in USTA? You're in a very high level position? Why have you put so much time into this?
Well, I think that this is something for everybody. This is one of the things I want to talk about because volunteerism is very important. And I think that tennis pros in a lot of respects are myopic sometimes, and they only see the pocketbook, and they're not willing to mark off time to, volunteer to do things to make our industry better, because in the end, it comes back to you, twofold if you make the industry better. I got into it just because I enjoy people and I enjoy our sport, and I want to make sure our sport was healthy. And it's a way for tennis pros who have a very high level of working knowledge of all of the industries, because we're the frontline providers for all the services the tennis pros are, to actually have a say in what's happening. A lot of times people that volunteer are, somebody that likes, adult league, or they like JTT, and they get involved and they get into a high level position, but they don't have the comprehensive knowledge. That's not to say that, they won't. I mean, like Bonnie Vandergriff was president of Southern, and she came from league and she knew everything. But in a lot of local, CTAs and things like that, they don't have that comprehensive knowledge, and the tennis pro can be the person that can help shape the narrative of what's going on in your community. If you, if you get involved, and you can just see past the fact that you're going to maybe lose a little bit of money on lessons, but in the long run, it's good because, people, when I hire people, I'll look to see if they've done any volunteer work. And, and to Brian's point earlier is, I'll look at, are you certified? If you've been 20 years and you're not certified, then obviously you're not bettering yourself. So that says a little bit about you also. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about you, right? One way or the other.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my last question to all of you is this, and it's how would you advise or encourage tennis professionals on how to grow their careers and make them attractive to future employers? So I actually think I could take that question now and just retitle this whole presentation with that question, because I think you guys have been nailing it this whole time. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, and I'll start with Mike, and then I'll go to Brett and Brian. You'll bring us home, and just take 30 seconds and just list what we've talked about here, or what you think is the most important of the things that you might have already expressed. Mike,
I'm going to go with this. We spend a lot of time on the tennis court teaching tennis, 1,500 hours a year on the tennis court. So we know how to teach. Anybody knows how to teach tennis. So if you're going to get really good in this industry, you have to refine these other business skills. And in order to do that, you got to put touches and practices of your own on a weekly basis. You need to be spending anywhere between 1 to 10 hours a week bettering yourself in things that aren't about teaching tennis. Pros know how to teach tennis. Now we got to be better business leaders. And if you do that, you're secure the rest of your life.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, to me, it just boils down to education and experience. Set your goal as to where you want to be in the industry, and then you have to get the experience and you have to educate yourself to where you want to be. And sometimes that means that you have to, you got to get the experience before you make the money sometimes. So to me, those are the main two things, is that, when I hire somebody, I'm looking for experience, and the more experience they have, the more they're going to get paid. But sometimes gaining that experience will cost you money in the short run, but in the long run, you'll make it all back tenfold.
Thank you. Brian?
I'll piggyback on what both Mike and Brett have said. I think one of it is also know your strengths and know your weaknesses, right? Be more well-rounded, understand more of the business. If it's clubs, understand governance. If it's whatever you want to go into, if it's financial, if it's communication, everything we talked about, you got to be better at. Again, I think what Mike said was great, which was you can teach a lesson. You can teach somebody how to hit to become a better tennis player. That's a given. What other areas do you need help with? What are you doing to assess what areas you need help with. Do you have a coach? Do you have somebody you're talking to? Do you have a friend? Can you do a SWOT analysis? Whatever it is, figure out where those challenges are, where those blind spots might be, and then what are you going to do to address them? Again, I mentioned communications. Join Toastmasters, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Be open enough to understand that you're not going to be great at everything, and actively work on some of those other pieces that you may not have strengths in, to try and gain a little more knowledge and education there.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you. Our time is up. I want to thank you for taking the time and making yourselves available to everyone that has tuned in to this seminar. And I found it extremely valuable. And I would imagine that you are going to hear from a lot of folks just from trying to glance at some of the comments that are going on in the chat column here. You have certainly hit home with a lot of people and what you're saying. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. And I look forward to catching up with you again. And thank you for all that were here to watch.
Yep. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.